shitty grubs,
Yeah.
or is the taste itself something that's unfamiliar, strange, or hard to? I mean, the basic issue, of course, is for many of us is how spicy is it? Okay, I remember eating in a Thai restaurant once, and they served me the soup, and they apparently knew a little bit about newcomers and visitors to the country, and the waitress said to me, "This is a soup. It's a very delicious soup, but do not eat those little slices of pepper because they're very hot." And I went, "Oh, what the heck, I'm an American. I've lived in the South. I've had Mexican peppers and so on and so forth. What the heck? If it's in the soup, I should try it." That little pepper, I think, left a mark on my tongue. It was so hot. Okay, it just really, really knocked my socks off. So there's the question of what kind of spices are used, and of course these are probably due to what's familiar and available in different kinds of countries that makes them special and different, other than the, normal.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Diversity Podcast with George Simons. So, if we're talking about intercultural communication, and if we're talking about two cultures meeting, then where does food come into play?
Well, that's a really good question because food is always there. I don't know how many times a day you indulge, but I would like to start with saying, I think this will put some perspective on it. The weirdest thing I have eaten in my life are, to me, witchetty grubs. These are little worms that exist in the trees, that grow in trees in Australia.
Grubs.
Witchetty grubs, they're called.
Grubs.
Yeah.
Is it a fruit?
They're little pink. No, they're worms.
Oh, the worms.
Yeah, they live in the trees. Okay.
Huh.
And I have them as a wonderful soup in a restaurant in Australia. Now, sometimes you like it, sometimes you don't, sometimes you're courageous, and sometimes you're not. But what we're saying is that we have stories in our own mind about what food is like, and this is a part of our culture. It's how we expect to eat, what we expect to eat, the sort of the politeness around eating, the ways in which we manage ourselves at table or sitting on the floor.
Eating manners.
Another instance for me, which was a little bit stressing, was I was in Dubai and I was sitting around a massive dish on the floor. It was like 1.5 meters wide, and there was a cooked goat on that.
Like
and
a
complete roasted goat,
Oh,
yeah.
God.
And I had the privilege as the guest to have the eyeball and the brains, and to do it with my right hand, fingers. Okay,
Oh my God.
so that's a different cultural context. Not something I was used to. I mean, it was sort of fun.
But was this a present for? Was this a gift for you because you were the guest? You got the brains.
Well, I was there working with the guy who invited me to his family and his 3 brothers. So, and the situation is, of course, that the men eat by themselves and the women eat by themselves.
Okay.
And so it was just the 4 of them and myself. Sitting on the floor around the dish.
So you ate goat brain.
Yeah,
Oh my
and
God.
sitting on the floor isn't great for me either. But I
Was
did
it tasty?
manage. I did manage. Yes. So.
Do you eat it raw? Oh, it's roasted, right? So.
Oh, it's roasted. Yes.
And seasoned.
Yeah, it was
my God.
good, by the way. It was
Oh, that's-
tasty. I mean, the trick is what we've been talking about in culture for a long time is that, especially from what we're learning from neuroscience, is that we have an automatic system which has stored up our cultural and our experiential moments, and provides them for us as sort of frames to understanding things that are new that we experience that come along all of a sudden, and the awareness that we're learning from our studies of neuroscience are that those automatic interpretations are also, is it something that I'm familiar with? And if it's not something I'm familiar with, generally there's anxiety or fear or something of that sort.
Yeah.
And this is, of course, at the root of what we always call our unconscious biases, the things that scare us about people that we don't know or don't understand or have us make stereotypes of them.
Yeah.
But anyway, food is part of the cultural story. And so, you grow up with the experience of eating, inevitably. And, then what happens is that you don't think of it as a cultural thing, perhaps, but I remember I grew up, as I've mentioned previously, in a immigrant family in the United States, which was fundamentally Eastern European and Western European, but mostly Eastern European on my mother's side, and she was the cook. So my mother would always serve things that I think of as, Polish dinners and Polish recipes, and so on and so forth. And so when my mother made something different or special, I thought of it as a Polish recipe. Little did I know that my mother had apprenticed to a Scottish cook. And a couple of my favorite tastes were things that she created, like pineapple upside-down cake, which I didn't realize till I was about 40 years old was not a Polish recipe, but I saw it in a bakery as I was walking across a bridge in Scotland, and that was my surprise.
You just assumed that everything your mother made at the time was a Polish dish.
Well, yeah, if it wasn't what I was getting at school or in other people's places, it was probably that. Oh, and there were certain festivals, of course, in which certain things predominated that were typically Polish in our family. And yet, on the other hand, given the fact that we were an immigrant mixed family,
Mm-hmm.
my mother and my father's sister and my grandmother, my dad's mother, they would prepare for help each other prepare their stuff for the holidays. So I can remember my mother and my grandmother and my aunt stretching a piece of dough across the top of the dining room table so they could make it thin as possible to roll it up and then make pastries from it, the kind of roll-up pastries that have poppy seeds inside or
Cinnabons.
Pardon?
Cinnabons.
Cinnabons?
Cinnabons.
They made that too, but these were the thin rolled-up pastries, and they, as I said, poppy seed or apples or cabbage, or they could be sweet or salty.
Mm-hmm.
And that sort. But they would make this whole big sheet of things, and then they could put different kinds of filling in them as they rolled them up, and so on. So that was very much a part of my childhood upbringing, and already they were sharing cultures, you might want to say, in putting those things together. So where does this take us as interculturalists? Well, I think one of the most interesting things is that, when people started working with diversity, one of the easiest things to start with was to have, for example, in a company cafeteria, okay, this is Mexican Day. We're going to have tacos and tortillas and, those kind of things.
Mm-hmm.
And then next week, okay, we're going to have Italian Day, and we're going to have different kinds of pasta, pizza, or whatever, okay? And it's sort of a way of inviting people to share culture that is relatively safe and easy to accomplish. And at the same time, people will have tastes and likes and dislikes. And if you do something like that, you should really not just do it and have people eat about it, but do it and have people talk about it. In other words, if you're running a diversity program in an organization, and one of the things you're going to have to do is celebrate a festival with food that's not from the core culture of the organization.
Yeah, it's a food exchange.
Yeah, then you put it together. Or if you have a food exchange, like everybody brings something, the potluck idea. That's also a good idea. But don't just eat and taste. Have a little process where people can talk about what it was like, what they felt about that, where it went, and so on.
Yeah, those work really well.
Yeah,
I think.
one of the best things that most people are familiar with CIETAR, the Society for Intercultural Education and Research. We had a congress. We have a congress. The different CIETAR groups have congresses all over the world. And we had one that was in Istanbul, one of my favorite towns, by the way, for munching as well as shopping. But we had a nice program in Istanbul, and they started the program off by putting us into small groups with one person in the group at least who spoke Turkish and English. Most of us were an English group. And they gave us the assignment to go out and buy things for the dinner that we would have together. We were sort of given lists of ours was fruit and vegetables, okay?
But they didn't say which fruits or
No, they didn't say anything like that. They said you go out and you're going to buy the fruits and vegetables for tonight, but come back with a story about the meaning of these fruits and vegetables, okay? What are they like in the culture? Do they represent something? Is there a story behind them, and so on? So we went out. I think there were 5 of us in the group, and we went to grocery store. And when we told the man, we went to little places. We didn't go to the big supermarkets. We went to the little commercial places we went for the fruit. Other people went for meat and other kinds of things. So, but when we told the proprietor or the person working there what we were doing, they were just wonderfully happy to tell us about the different fruits, and especially the ones that we were not familiar with that we saw sitting there and
what's this?
Tell the story. What's this? Yeah, and when is it used, and why is it important in the cuisine, and does it have some special? Sometimes you eat certain things on certain days or certain festivals and so on. So we got tons of information like that, and then we brought that back, and it was just a great festival of food, and we discussed what the food was all about in our experiences of gathering it. So that was a wonderful exercise that I would love to see repeated in other places where we have our conferences and congresses, because it does give you, when you start getting the stories behind things, why is this sort of thing done, or why do we eat this sort of thing in this season, or even why do we fast, and other kinds of aspects like that, like Lent and Ramadan have important significance. And they have the significance is beyond the food. If you're a Christian or a Muslim celebrating Lent or Ramadan, the whole idea is that what you save on fasting and food, you should somehow distribute to people who have less money and are poor, or taking care of people is part of the story. So that's a beautiful part of that. Since everybody has to eat, how do you do that? So that's very interesting stuff to explore, and it's the thing I love about it is it's an easy way into an intercultural discussion.
Yeah. So you've lived in many different countries. Is there a country that stood out where it took you a while to get used to the food there?
Well, that's a good question. First of all, I have not lived in too many different countries. I've lived in the U.S., Germany, Netherlands, France now, and spent some pretty long times in places like Indonesia Um,
Oh, you wouldn't count it as living there.
sorry?
You wouldn't count it as living there.
Yeah, and also regionally,
Uh-huh.
this is interesting, okay? Living in Ohio and in California are really two different things. A lot of the dishes are the same, but people always ask me, what's your favorite American food since I'm living abroad? What do you miss? And I say, oh, good Mexican food. I'm not Mexican, but having lived in California, I really loved some of the Mexican dishes and so on. So
Yeah.
it was really strange as that. So, but when it comes to did I have some getting used to, I think to me the getting used to is not very challenging in the sense that I think I have mentioned in another one of our talks that my father used to, every time I do something on the weekend with my father, we'd go out fishing or go someplace, and on the way back he'd take me to a different ethnic restaurant.
Mm.
So, by the age of 14, I had eaten my way around the world just in the melting pot restaurants of Cleveland, Ohio, where we
That's
lived.
nice.
So that part is good. The getting used to is more of a question of, I find, not the food, but are there rules for how you eat it?
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's questions of knives and forks and chopsticks. Yeah, and but also how, when do you take it? When are you served? One of my interesting moments was years ago. I was backpacking in Sri Lanka, and I was invited to a family's dinner, and it was an anniversary of the parents actually, and a kid had invited me to come, and so I sat down and we were having a good chit chat and all that other sort of stuff, and then we sat down at the table and the food is there and nobody's eating, and I didn't want to go first, of course, but and then finally at a certain point, the little kid, the 9-year-old sitting next to me, sort of poked me in the ribs and he said, "Master, you have to start eating because family can't eat until you eat." So that was the cultural
Oh my God.
rule of that.
Because you were the guest. So
Yeah.
you had to start.
Yeah.
But nobody told you.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's interesting. So you were talking about the story that you tell yourself about food, but that got me thinking about stories that cultures tell themselves about food, where something is tasty or something is not tasty, because in some countries they eat a certain dish, which in other countries they would say like, I cannot understand how you could eat that. Like that does not sound appealing to me or tasty.
Well, there's two levels. I mean, there's a level of, is it weird, like the witchetty grubs,
Yeah.
or is the taste itself something that's unfamiliar, strange, or hard to? I mean, the basic issue, of course, is for many of us is how spicy is it? Okay.
Mm.
I remember eating in a Thai restaurant once, and they served me the soup, and they apparently knew a little bit about newcomers and visitors to the country, and the waitress said to me, "This is a soup. It's a very delicious soup, but do not eat those little slices of pepper because they're very hot." And I went, "Oh, what the heck? I'm an American. I've lived in the South. I've had Mexican peppers and so on and so forth. What the heck? If it's in the soup, I should try it." That little pepper, I think, left a mark on my tongue. It was so hot. Okay, it just really, really knocked my socks off. So there's the question of what kind of spices are used.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, these are probably due to what's familiar and available in different kinds of countries that makes them special and different, other than the, normal things that we may use. So, and there also, of course, it's another topic, but there are maybe religious restrictions that certain people have, whereas my Turkish and Muslim friends and Jewish friends don't eat pork. And on the other hand, the Hindus don't eat beef, you know, and so we look at what that's all about. And there's a whole area of culture which we have not yet explored, which is both fascinating and frustrating, and that is we have all kinds of people creating rules about what's healthy to eat and what's not healthy to eat. Some of this is well scientifically based, and some of it is almost a religion in its own right. I've had 64 interns in my business since the beginning, and it used to be most everybody ate everything I cooked. Now most everybody cooks for themselves because they have their rules about what's healthy, what's fattening, what's this, what's that, and so on.
So this is a new thing.
Yeah, this is a whole new cultural conversation.
Interesting.
Well,
what do you mean? Like people not eating meat, for instance? Or?
Well, a lot of people are vegan or vegetarian, yes. And then there are people who say, well, I have allergy to this or that, or, you know, I've got a problem with gluten or something of that sort. And
but people have had, is that new, that people have a problem with gluten?
I think it has been surging in recent, well, I'm 87 years old.
Yeah.
The health what I want to say advice when I was a kid was eat your carrots, they're good for your eyes. You know.
Yeah, that's the same. I remember that.
Yeah, there's lots of things about what some foods are good for and what you should do with them, and you know, and then there was another thing that shows up in the etiquette of my mother's word was clean your plate. Okay, I'm not taking any prisoners, and by that she meant leftovers in the fridge. Okay.
So you had to eat everything.
You had to eat everything that was on your plate. Yeah. Okay. And then on the other hand, I've been in places where if you eat everything on your plate, they just feel that you need more, so they just pile it on your plate before you stop. You know.
Yeah.
So it's about quantities too, but I think that the stories about things that we eat and don't eat, they can be very individual too within a culture. But you know, why we would think certain tastes are not appropriate or certain things don't go with certain things, we say about that. So it's a matter of how things are prepared and what flavors are added to them, and
or which drink goes with which.
Well, then
which
drinks
food.
become a whole other story. You know, do you drink alcohol? Do you not drink alcohol? Wine, you know, what wine goes with what meal? That's a whole science that I don't know about. I'm just happy when they fill my glass and I'm able to enjoy it. I'm no expert at that sort of thing. But then, you know, there's issues about what kind of drinks you have, what kind of things do people eat, street food. I mean, incredible differences in street food around the world. You know, I have not yet tried roasted scorpions on a stick.
No, you haven't.
No, have you tried them?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, they're
tasty.
They're crunchy.
Crunchy, yeah, okay.
Salty, crunchy, but I think we were haggling about the price. This was in Thailand, in Bangkok, and we were haggling about the price, and then I got it down lower and lower. I was getting pretty good at the haggling. But then he gave me a really small one, so there wasn't a lot of meat in it.
Yeah.
So that was just all crunch.
Crunchy, yeah.
Oh, it was alright. It tasted good, very salty.
But interestingly, I found that street food is often very healthy because it's cooked right there.
It's fresh.
And it's fresh. And I can remember having food in restaurants abroad that I was either upset stomach or something from them, and they were not things that I thought would do that to me by any means. So we have to we look at what's there, and I just love street food.
Yeah, you like street food?
China and Indonesia, really good stuff. In Istanbul, my two favorite eating cities are Istanbul and Barcelona, and that's Chipirones en su tinta. It's that's calamares in their own ink. It's with a tomato sauce and ink. One of my all-time Catalonian favorites. I mean, I don't want to get started on my list of favorites, but I do have two things that I love, and I've loved to cook for years, and I have friends who are devotees, so they say, when are you going to make? Number one is ajo blanco, which is a garlic soup with fruit in it.
Garlic soup.
Cold soup. And I discovered it in a recipe in Catalonia many, many years ago. And my friends just love that, so they say, when are you going to make that? Actually, it's the first recipe we did a cookbook for Ciotar, which is still available, by the way, for Ciotar Europa. And my ajo blanco is the first recipe in it. Yeah, it's in there.
So is it the starter, or what's the...
Well, it's a soup. It's sort of like a gazpacho, a cold summer soup.
Okay, cold summer soup.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know much about cold summer soups, but that's maybe because I'm from a colder country, so we eat warm soups usually.
Yeah, well, that's true. Although I remember being on a cruise once, and I don't know who the cooks were, but there were different kinds of cold soups almost every day, from fruit and vegetables and things of that sort. My other super recipe is what we call laksa limak. And laksa is a basically Singaporean, Malaysian, Indonesian dish, and it's fundamentally a seafood soup. But it's got an extraordinary sauce flavor to it, and my friends love it. They say, when you're going to make laksa, the trick is it takes almost 3 hours to make the sauce that then flavors the soup when you put the ingredients in.
So it takes
and
a
the
while.
ingredients can be seafood. Sometimes people add chicken or other kinds of things, and bean sprouts and chopped cucumber and things of that sort.
Yeah.
You can buy probably 100 different versions of it in Singapore on the street, but that's a very good.
It's so nice how you have all these, like in your profession as a trainer in intercultural, bringing people together. There's always these differences, right? You got people who are direct, you got people who are indirect. But what the nice thing about food is that everybody eats.
Everybody eats. You gotta eat. You gotta eat, man.
You know?
One other thing that I loved about the streets in Singapore is that there's another recipe which is called ikan bilis kacang, and I'll make that for you one of these days, because I found the ikan bilis. They're tiny little dried anchovies that you saute with peanuts and then mix with rice, and it's not a full meal generally speaking, but it's a side dish to something else that you're eating, or you can just buy a little cup of it on the streets in Singapore, or it's there.
So street food is quite common in some countries. You said in Istanbul you really like the street food, right?
Well, I like the street food. It's not big in Istanbul. There are sort of carry-out restaurants and marketplaces where you will eat street food.
Because I feel like in a country like Indonesia or Thailand, it's everywhere, the street food. It's like everywhere you go.
Yeah, there are places where it's far more abundant, and
But then here in France, in the south of France, like street food, maybe. I've seen one stand.
You go to a marketplace, and there'll be several stands in the marketplace.
Yeah, marketplace. Yeah.
And there are markets, okay, there are markets that like once a week or twice a week where you can actually get street food. I wouldn't say my experience in France is that the street food that I see is usually immigrant street food. Chinese, Japanese.
On the markets in France.
On the markets in France, or Arabic,
Huh.
Muslim recipes. So that's it's
Because French food is generally not eaten at a stand on the street.
yeah. I mean, and there's the other thing about what's lunch mean. I mean, you're from the Netherlands, and I worked in the Netherlands for 3 years, and I realized that a cheese sandwich, much like the one you had for breakfast, is lunch. Okay.
Yeah.
One of my delights when I was working in Rijswijk was that the cafeteria of the company that I worked for had quite a few people who were from Indonesia and other places, Sarawak and those kind of places. So one day a week they had all of these specialties, and
Yeah,
I would
good.
go down and garbage up on stuff.
Yeah, that's so
But
funny.
yeah, although every place has its delights. One of my delights in the Netherlands was the wonderful green herring that you can buy on the street usually, or in
Yeah,
a
that's
little
street food.
shop. And
Street food in the Netherlands, fish.
it's a raw herring that's been
Yeah.
soaked a bit in things. You dip it in onions, and then you just lower it down into your mouth a bite at a time, and I really love it. It's great. It's delicious.
Yeah, they catch it once a year, and
Yeah,
then they store it in salt
yeah,
throughout the year.
yeah,
So in the beginning of the season, they taste much fresher, and
Yeah,
then throughout the year they get saltier.
yeah,
And
yeah.
at the end of the year, so you
Yeah.
have people that prefer like end of the year haring or beginning
Mhm,
of the season
mhm,
haring.
mhm. Yeah, of places that I've worked, other places that I've enjoyed eating are Brussels, for example. I trained communication for 27 years off and on at Management Center Europe in Brussels. And you could go down to the big square in Brussels, and all around were little shops with largely the real good seafood plates. That would have a whole collection of fruits de mer seafood for you, and you'd pick out some special places. And I got used. That's where I got an addiction to mussels. I like mussels very much.
You like mussels? I don't like mussels.
I don't like mussels. Well, see, to each his own.
I had it once for I was having my girlfriend at the time. We were staying at her grandparents' place,
Mm-hmm.
and they made us. This was in Italy,
Uh-huh.
and they made us lunch, and this was a spaghetti mussel.
Oh,
mussels.
okay.
So I guess that's normal, and they're all like, let's eat, I was like, oh my god, we got to put
Yeah,
all the mussels in. Actually, it wasn't that bad, but I would never make that
So
myself.
you wouldn't do it on your own, yeah. Well, I tend to make paella from time to time, and I put mussels and shrimp and maybe chicken and so on and so forth,
Yeah.
which is favorites.
It's the structure more, It's not really the taste because they're salty, right? Mussels?
Well, if you have fresh ones, they're not super salty.
No? Oh.
No, I mean, if you just cook mussels, and then you can use beer or something else for the liquid that you cook them in. I generally use beer, and some people put cream in and other things, and then people dip them in things. They have dips for the different kinds of 2 or 3 different kinds of dips for the mussels when you're eating them.
Huh.
But yeah, that's a common thing. It's other kinds of things that people get known for in the military in the First World War, of course. The British and the French and the Second World War as well. The British and the French fighting together, and there would be signs in the dugouts which said, "Beef eaters, Those were the Brits, okay? And on the other hand, you know, they had
What did they have?
snail eaters.
Snail eaters.
You know,
And those were the French then.
yeah, the French guys were the
Snail
escargot specialists, and
Oh, there.
so they were.
You got one of those divides again. So were you then allowed to eat where you want,
Well, you
or
can eat where you want, probably, but there was just that the food characterized the people, you know, and they
that's great.
I don't know how they thought about it, positive or negative, but you know, there you are, the beef eaters and the snail munchers here from France,
Yeah.
and I think everybody thinks of Italy as pasta, although pasta is more of an entree in Italy than it is the main course.
Because in the Netherlands, usually people eat pasta as for dinner, and then it's like the big meal of the day. You know, after work you have a big warm meal. But that's not in most countries the case.
Well, and also it's class level of probably what people can afford, and pasta can be reasonable. I had a classmate, an Italian classmate, and when I was in grade school, and we hung out around a lot together. So I learned about pasta and a number of Italian dishes. But even more interesting was I had a Lebanese classmate who I hung out with a lot, and his mom made all the wonderful Lebanese dishes that nobody had heard about. I would come home and they said, "What'd you have for dinner?" And I said, "Well, there was this," and I tried to describe it. If I didn't, I might have had the name for it, but it wouldn't have made any difference anyway. So I was very enriched by that sort of stuff. And as I said, my father was always a adventurous gourmand. He loved to cook, and when I was in grade school. My classmates would say, "Is your dad making pizza this weekend?" So they didn't come to see me; they came to eat my dad's pizza.
So he was a good pizza maker. Like, did he make the dough?
Sort of. He was the weekend and holiday cook.
Okay.
So he would do some special things and experiment with things, and he was very, very experimental and try new ingredients and so on. And he introduced me to eating what do you call them? Ants in chocolate.
What?
We used to have little bars of chocolate that had ants for crunchy in them.
Ants?
Ants, yeah. Little black things that
I
went around. Yeah.
In the chocolate?
In the chocolate. Yeah, it was good.
And then the reason was for the crunchy.
Yeah, and also they serve cicadas.
God. So did he
roasted
the ants?
cicadas? Yeah.
Well, I want to go back to the ants. So did he put them there himself, or?
Yeah, you can see a little ant when you put the thing in there.
Oh my God.
And then he also got roasted grasshoppers, which were quite tasty.
Huh.
So it's all about. It's not about your stomach; it's about your head. I think
it's the story.
What is this like? Is this okay? What
Yeah.
am I going to do here?
Am I gonna die if I eat this?
Yeah. Well, some things are better for you than others.
Oh my God.
Most of the time, it's a question of quantity rather than what exactly it is. One thing that a lot of people don't know, that nutmeg, for example, is extremely toxic.
I can
In
imagine
a large quantity, but all you do is scrape a little bit on something, and so who cares,
Well, they say insects are
Yeah.
really protein rich, right?
Yeah, they are.
Yeah.
Well, and I have another theory going on that everybody is so cautious about foods these days. There are good reasons for a lot of that, but I also have a hunch that we were sort of fed whatever we were fed, everything, and clean your plate, and
That's back in the day, right?
yeah, back in the days, the days, and now the sensitivity to all this sort of stuff. I have a hunch that I'm no professional at this, and maybe somebody who's studied this can say a lot more about it, but I have a hunch that my internal resistance is a hell of a lot stronger than a lot of people today, because we ate everything, and you know, the hygiene issues were not the same,
Yeah.
that sort of stuff.
Well, you come from a time when there was a moment where there was the food, and that was the food there was. There wasn't any other option.
Well, when I was between ages roughly 1 and 4, you know, was the aftermath of the end of the Great Depression in the United States. But I was lucky to have a father who would run out in the woods and get things that we could eat, get a couple fish out of the creek, and you know, we weren't dependent on the money for that, because he knew how to do that. He was a good woodsman, as well as being a connoisseur of different restaurants later on in my life.
And if you're hungry enough, then you know, gotta eat it.
Well, yeah, but I mean, he told me at one time that they would see homeless people, bums we called them back then.
Bums?
Yeah, they would gather in groups, and they'd make a fire, and they'd steal a chicken someplace, and they'd roast the chicken. So my dad and his friends decided to do that one time, but they had a very bad accident because they didn't know you had to clean the chicken first, and it exploded when they were cooking it all over them.
That happens?
Yeah, that happened.
They stole a chicken first?
At least that's the story my dad told. Yeah.
So you have to...
This is back during the Depression, of course.
Oh my God, yeah.
So there they were. They said, "Oh, why not steal a chicken someplace and see what you can do?" My grandmother was, you know, would cook chicken for the family, and myself and my cousins, she would get a live chicken, would go down the basement, she'd break the chicken's neck, kill it, you know, and then she would cut it up, and we would have to pluck all the feathers out of the chicken. Can't eat the chicken with the feathers, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so that was a normal part of food preparation in my generation from
Yeah, I've seen that.
the past generation.
I've
Yeah.
seen that before, but never done that myself. Is that
Yeah.
difficult? Like, does it take a lot of effort?
And then we have what we call the pin feathers, which are the little pieces that stick back in, and you got to force those out, maybe with a knife or tweezers or something of that sort, or then just put the chicken over the fire to burn off the little residue of feathers that is there. So there was that.
It's so different, and now everyone, like these days, people can be choosy, right?
Yeah.
About
Well,
food.
you know, there's this common grade school story of a teacher taking the kids out to the farm, and they run across a cow, and the teacher says, "See, this is where your milk comes from." And the kids say, "No, milk comes out of a box." You know? That sort of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, times have changed.
Times have changed.
Yeah, so we can wrap it up maybe. So
It's never wrapped up, but
it was a story about food.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so I will wish everybody bon appetit. Thank you very much for listening. It's a great opportunity to share our perspectives with each other. And if you're interested in raising more questions or have ideas about topics that you'd like to see addressed in this podcast series, don't hesitate to make a note and let us know in the responses below. Thanks. Bye-bye.